We went from having, over the course of 3 years, we got to 1,000 users to we were getting 1,000 people signed up a day.
That's Adam Alpert. He got into Y Combinator and raised over $3 million for his hiring startup, Pangea. And now he says he might never need to raise money again.
You can build a hyper-efficient, scalable business without raising tens of millions of dollars.
But things weren't always going so well. After failing to get into accelerators and multiple pivots, he leaned on Stoic philosophy to keep going.
And we tend to focus on or get upset by things that happen in our life that we actually have no control over. Doing so is a waste of energy and waste of time.
He told me what he's learned about hiring from facilitating thousands of fractional hires, the thought exercise that every founder should use to sanity check their priorities and expenses, and why founders should build an SVP, not an MVP. This is Adam Alpert's founding journey. Adam, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to talk about accelerators, right? So you did an incubator at Brown, and then you did YC and another accelerator after that. Why do three? Why do so many of those types of experiences?
Well, first off, not all accelerators are created equal or have similar models. We've done 4 accelerators, but only one of them took equity. So that was YC. Before we did YC, when I think it's helpful to go back to the beginning a bit. When I started Pangea, I was coming straight out of college. So, and trying to think about any possible way to get this thing off the ground. So the first accelerator that we did was actually an accelerator program put on by Brown. And typically this is one that you do like in between your like junior and senior year, your sophomore to junior year. It's like a summer, it's like a thing you do during the summer, kind of instead of an internship. And my co-founder and I, our hack was to actually do it post-grad because it gave us a bit of structure, after graduating to start working on the company. And, from there, we were in Providence, Rhode Island. It isn't exactly the startup center of the world. We had no money, and I was just trying to think about any possible resource that we could participate in or kind of mine to help us keep moving forward. So, we kept kind of like leapfrogging from first it was Brown's accelerator, then it was a local social impact accelerator called Social Enterprise Greenhouse, which gave us free co-working space for a year. And then ultimately we worked our way up to Mass Challenge, which is a more well-known accelerator program. And they were running at the time a Rhode Island specific cohort. Again, it was no equity, right? It was just an opportunity to meet other amazing founders and get a platform, right? I think that as a founder, it is your responsibility to bring home the bacon for the team, right? So anything that's going to get you, an audience, anything that's going to surround the company and your team with really smart, driven, ambitious people generally is a thing worth doing. So we leapfrogged throughout these programs, got a bunch of free co-working, didn't pay for office space for like three years. And then ultimately we were in a place to get into YC and raise money. And I think it's a very different journey to get to YC than most founders take. A lot of founders, are like at the idea stage when they join YC, right? And it's just 2 founders and a vision, and they leave their jobs and they're just getting things started. But we really had to earn our way in, and it took us a while to get there.
When you're building a startup, it's easy to get heads down in your work and forget to take care of yourself. But Mark Health can help you optimize your wellness and performance. They've got a wide array of specialized lab tests that help uncover health markers that traditional primary care might miss. They offer everything from metabolic and cardiovascular panels to hormone assessments in ways that are designed to help you get a thorough understanding of your own health. Plus, you can easily order their tests online without having to deal with any potential pushback from your primary care provider. By identifying potential issues early, Mark can help you take proactive steps towards optimal health. Head to markdiagnostics.com now to get started and optimize your health with precision testing. Use the code HOUT for 10% off your first lab order. Yeah, I mean, Mass Challenge, also a well-known name, Mass Challenge and YC, both I think the first time you applied, you guys actually didn't get in. So it really has been sort of a gradual journey. Tell me about sort of why it made sense to sort of keep going back to that route and why it was so valuable to be part of these communities and these accelerators.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people put too much stake in an accelerator acceptance or rejection, right? We got rejected from Mass Challenge 2 times before before we got in, right? And each time we got rejected, it's, they actually gave you some feedback and they gave you like your scoring rubric, and it helped us ultimately refine what we were building. Again, we were super young and hadn't really been immersed in the start. I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background. I was a filmmaker. So we were figuring out all of this ourselves, and that feedback was helpful, but some people will only do their startup if they get accepted into YC or some accelerator program. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I mean, most successful startups don't go through an accelerator program. If you look at most successful companies today, like they didn't do some program. I mean, there's plenty that obviously did Y Combinator. We know a lot of them. But for us, it was about, getting the feedback and sticking with it. Like at the end of the day, we really felt like we were onto something and felt like we could bring some serious value in the world of recruiting and hiring and staffing and early career development. So we kept at it. And yeah, we actually, ultimately when we applied to YC the first time, we'd actually raised a $500,000 pre-seed. We got an article in TechCrunch. It was at the beginning of COVID. At the time, we were a college student freelancing platform. So we were helping college students find remote jobs. And in April of 2020, this was like, we went gangbusters, right? We went from having, over the course of 3 years, we got to 1,000 users to we were getting 1,000 people signed up a day. And we went into the YC. We got a YC interview that month. And we went in there and I had printed out a chart and it was a hockey stick graph of our user signups. And I picked it up and I was like, look, and they said, put that away, right? We know that college students need jobs, but you have to convince us why companies want to hire college students. And at that point in time, we actually didn't have a great answer. Our transaction volume was pretty low. It was like $1,000 a month or a couple $1,000s a month. And we got rejected. We didn't get in. That we had at that point, we had raised $500,000. We were committed. And, we had 10 months of runway or something, a bit more than that. So we just, put our heads down. We said, all right, well, people want to use we believe that people want to use our product. We have all these people signing up. So let's see what we can just do on our own. And over the course of the next 5 months or so, we took it from $1,000 in monthly revenue to $40,000 in monthly revenue. And we reapplied to YC. And this time, we got another interview and they asked us what changed. And, I think I called our interviewer. His name is Tim Brady, who was the first COO of Yahoo. And I said, well, Tim, you rejected us 5 months ago. We wanted to prove you wrong. So, and here we are. And we got into YC and that was a game changer. And we haven't done another program since, but if you're someone who's thinking about getting started or in that early phase, or maybe you don't, you're not in SF or New York or have access to, these networks necessarily, I think that accelerators can be incredibly impactful, especially ones that don't take equity, right? So if there's like a local accelerator and you can get in and you get to do it for free, oftentimes there's very little to lose, right? It's just you're getting access to a co-working space, you get to meet some new people, and it gives you a deadline and some structure to work towards, which I think is one of the most valuable part of any accelerator program is it has an end date, right? So any accelerator program you get in and there's some date where it ends. It's the thing that makes it different than an incubator, right? Which is just kind of a co-working space. And it's saying, hey, between now, in the next 90 days, what can you do that's going to make an impact on your venture? So that way, when you present to a room full of people and you can showcase what you've done. And there's nothing necessarily unique about YC that makes you more able to get a lot done in 90 days than another accelerator. So I'm very pro accelerator. I'm very pro taking advantage of any resource that you can kind of bring to your disposal and taking advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you mentioned there that I want to go back to real quick is some founders will say they're only going to do their startup if they get into YC. Like they're like, oh, the brand of YC, I need that to validate that I can be a founder and I'm going to have success. It's going to be worth the opportunity cost, right? In my mind, getting rejected and then coming back and saying, I'm going to prove you wrong, and then actually doing it, that mindset is so different than the mindset of the person who will only do it if they get the validation. And I think that that's really a big part of the difference of who should be a founder and who maybe should go into consulting or into banking or something like that. Like, what are your thoughts on that sort of founder mindset shift?
Real founders don't wait for permission, right? Real founders don't wait for someone to give them the thumbs up or the affirmation, right? I think it feels good when you get that affirmation. Obviously, it feels great if you can you could be working at Google or some, big company, and NYC gives you that voter approval. So they give you, $500,000. So it's, they de-risk it a lot. But I think this is true for building things and bringing things together is you don't always need to wait for permission, right? Like you are honestly the biggest impediment towards your own success and your own growth, right? Like what's stopping you from just doing it, right? So, I'll give you like another small anecdote. I love skiing. I love snowboarding. I live in New York. It isn't exactly the ski and snowboard capital of the world. I'm also a filmmaker, right? I started Pangea because I was a freelance videographer in college who wanted to find more freelance video projects and gigs. Now we have Pangea. So I was looking to go, I love documentaries and I love ski documentaries. I love ski films. And I just went on Google last week to see if I could find any ski films playing in New York. And I was surprised, but I couldn't find any, or the ones that there had been one or two that happened back in September, which doesn't do me any good now in the middle of November. So I was like, oh, that's kind of lame. But what's stopping me? What's stopping me from just renting out a theater and inviting a bunch of my friends and just doing my own screening? And then I asked myself again, what's stopping me? And I was like, well, actually nothing. So I reached out to a bunch of theaters, and now I've rented out a movie theater. I'm in touch with a bunch of independent film directors, and we're putting on a one-night ski film festival in Brooklyn next month.
Whoa.
This is in my free time.
When is it? Give us the detail.
It's December 19th.
Okay.
We're calling it the first annual NY Ski. It's an evening of ski films. And then we're going to do a ski trip up, somewhere in like Vermont or New Hampshire or upstate New York this winter as well. But I mentioned this story because it's like a smaller, more well-scoped example than like starting a company. But like no one gave me permission to go rent out a theater and like host this film night. It's just something that I wanted to do. I had a vision for and I wanted to put together. And I think that we are all presented with these type of opportunities every day, every week, every month. Now, listen, we can't, jump at every idea that pops into our head. It's impossible. But I think most people don't take that risk, right? Or sometimes there is that good idea once a quarter. And it's like nothing's stopping you from doing that. Like if you want to do it, go do it. You can make it happen. There's nothing that makes anyone else in the world who's done something more special or more capable than you. Like if they can do it, why can't you do it? And it's okay to take a risk. It's okay if things don't quite work out. But if you don't take that risk, you don't take that chance, it's like you're guaranteed not to work out. So it's impossible if you don't give it a shot. And obviously the same thing is true with the startup, right? If you are going to wait for permission or some external validation from like an investor or, the press, you're never going to, make progress. I think that if anything, you should seek validation from users and customers. That ultimately is, and if they haven't told you no, right, 100 times, then you haven't validated or invalidated. YC is not going to validate or invalidate you. And raising a pre-seed or seed is not what you should look at for validation or invalidation. And we now live in a world where there are so many of these low-code, no-code tools. You have Typeform, you have Airtable, you have these things that aren't even coding, but you can, with Zap, you can have a website, you can have an intake form, you could drop it into a database, you can ping ChatGPT, you can send it an email. You can create like a pretty well flushed out experience, just by connecting together these different tools for under $100 and in a couple of hours, right? So it's actually never been easier in the history of humanity to like get started with something. And I think people sometimes think about building some app, building something, building some crazy AI, something that's going to require $500,000 and take 5 years to build. And so actually, like, what can you do to validate that customers need this thing? And how can you do it in a weekend or in a couple of weeks? And if you focus on that, everything else will come. If you focus on that, you build an audience and you get some revenue in, you get a sense of what the product is, you'll have an easier time getting into a Y Combinator. You'll have an easier time raising money from another investor, right? And the score will take care of itself, right? Just by focusing on what's really important, which is, building something that people want.
I couldn't agree more. You put that so well. All you need is sort of the intrinsic belief and the intrinsic motivation and the belief in yourself. And the tools are getting more and more accessible and easier to use. So you kind of hit on something at the end there that I want to talk about, which is a lot of people talk about MVPs, right? Minimum viable products. You talk about SVPs. I've never heard this before we got connected here, but tell me what's an SVP and why should founders build them instead?
Yeah. So, MVP is something that's become popularized with the, the lean startup kind of school of thought, right? There's a lot of debate around this in the founder world. But for those of you who don't know, MVP is what's the minimum viable product? What's the smallest thing you can build to validate or invalidate a hypothesis? Now, I think that a lot of people, when thinking about MVP, get really focused on the product part, right? So it's product, right? And they think that's still an app. It's still a piece of technology. It's still something I need to go raise $500,000 to build the MVP, something like that. When in reality, an MVP can be like a Figma prototype. It could be a landing page. It could be a Typeform, Airtable. You do it manually in an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, right? So I have this concept called an SDP. And I used to talk about this being, the S being like a viable product, right? Like what's like the is good. I don't think it's like a helpful. Okay, we understand like what goes into like the pretty minimal version, but what's like the thing you could build that actually does deliver some kind of value, right? And it can literally be like you pick up the phone and you call me. You're looking to hire someone, you call me, and then I call 20 people, and then I like send an email connecting you both, right? And that's like the is viable way. I could, and obviously we use technology to all that, but you could literally do it just like an old school staffing agency, right? So viable product, or if you want to be careful with your language, simplest viable product, right? And when I scope this for folks, I say building an SVP, you shouldn't touch a line of code. It shouldn't take you more than 2 days to build something, and it should cost you less than $100, right? So what can you do for $100 in 2 days without having to code anything, right? Or if you can code, what can you code in 2 days for $100? To actually validate or create some actual like proof of concept, actually get something to start working that you could literally put in a user's hands and they can get a sense of it. And it just gets you talking to users at the end of the day. It doesn't need to be the thing that's the scalable version of it or the prettiest version of it. But when it's super simple, it's easy to make something that's still smooth, right? So I really encourage a lot of founders. And again, because we get so in our heads, we think about all the things that can go wrong, right? We talk ourselves out of I'm not going to rent out a movie theater and do a film night because what happens if I if I can't get a movie theater to say yes, or if I can't sell enough tickets, or I lose a bunch of money doing it. We get in our heads, right? And honestly, the more complexity there is, the more things that can go wrong, right? Elon Musk was once asked, what's like the best part? Like talk about engineering, what's the best thing, right? And he said the best part is no part, because parts break and parts require maintenance, right? So the best part is actually a part that you don't need, right? So when thinking about an SVP, it's like you remove all these things that can break actually, and it makes it easier to build an actual smooth experience. And it's really helpful, especially when talking to aspiring founders or maybe founders who are non-technical, who feel like they're stuck. It's like, I have an idea, but I need to build this thing. In order to build this thing, I need to go raise money, right? But then they have a hard time raising money because they don't have the technical expertise and nothing to show. So they're like stuck in this loop for sometimes I've met these people and they've been like in that loop for years, right? They've been like for years, they have some idea. And if they can just convince a tech co-founder to build it for free or convince an investor to give them $1 million, like it'll all come through. And I'm like, you're just creating excuses now, right? You could have last weekend, like asked yourself, what could I do in a weekend? What could I do for $100 to actually create something that creates value I can do with my own capabilities without needing help from someone? And then they're actually able to go and do it. And they're able to kind of keep moving. So I'm a huge believer in SVP. It's kind of a riff on the MVP, but people actually misunderstand MVP. And when I say it doesn't have to need to be a product. It just needs to be like, it can be manual, it could be super simple. It doesn't need to involve any tech at all. And I think it's a really helpful grounding concept. And frankly, it's something that we use internally at Pangea all the time. Whenever we're scoping out a new feature, a new direction, we ask ourselves, how can we do this with a Typeform and Airtable? And like an API endpoint? Like we don't need to make any front end updates to our product. We can just, what can we do in an hour, to kind of address this problem? And honestly, it's caused us to rapidly accelerate our ability to ship new products, because even the new product that we build is just so well scoped and so narrow. And it's so focused on driving impact that we've gotten out of our own way quite a bit.
Do you think this helped you guys hit number one of the day and actually of the week too on Product Hunt?
I think it did. And with that, we didn't really do anything too fancy. I think we built a great product. We built a good audience. Our community was super excited about it. And, We just got lucky, right? But I think people with product hunt put a little bit too much emphasis on the product hunt. It's kind of like a thing that you can do to get some traffic. To if you can get to number 1, 2, 3 today, it's helpful. We still get some traffic from it, but even like that, it's like an accelerator. It's like you can launch on product hunt and not get to the top 10 and still be a successful company. So yeah, I think the product hunt we won, it was really we cleared off our entire calendar the entire day and said all we're doing today is product hunt, and we're going to make sure that everyone in our network knows that we're live on product hunt, and we're going to spend literally every waking hour doing that until the clock is up. The curse of that was we ended up being number 1 of the day, and once you're number 1 of the day, then you're in the running for number 1 of the week. So what's supposed to be a 1-day thing ended up into a week-long thing. And then by then, we were like number 3 for the month. So then it became the entire month of April was like, we had to kind of keep our eyes on it. So it was kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Give me the tactical rundown. How does someone get to number 1 of the day on product hunt?
I mean, there's a number of things that go into a successful product hunt launch. I think making sure that your messaging is super clear, understanding who your audience is and like who's on product hunt and why they can find value in it. You need to launch at, I think it's like, 12:01 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're East Coast, that's like 3:01 in the morning. So you have to you have to get up like in the middle of the night and like make the thing live and go and comment and like start letting people know about it. Then generally the teams in Europe have an early day, early mover advantage. So when there's like European companies that go live, like 3 a.m. Eastern time is like, it's like 9 a.m. for Europe. So they're awake. So you'll wake up and you'll be like 10th or 15th because the European startups have just been like grinding at it already for like 9 hours. And I remember being really demoralized. We woke up because it was supposed to be a big moment for us. And we were like 15th. And the top teams already had like 300 or 400 votes. And it was just like an insurmountable difference. And we said, we cleared off our calendars today. We're just going to get to it. So we did the thing, started letting people know that we were live on product hunt, texting, we sent out a bunch of emails, posted on social media. And then I basically went on like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and just like went through my entire list of connections and was just sharing, hey, we're live on product hunt. Like literally like just sent thousands of messages a day. And we got a lot of support. Not everyone always does support, but we got a lot of support. Ultimately, those European teams went to sleep. They thought they had it in the bag. And while they were asleep, we were awake and we just were up until 3 a.m, just going at it. And every comment counts. So every like counts, every comment counts. Not every like is treated equally necessarily, but they do like new accounts. Just like creating a new account is a pain for people. It's not a frictionless process, let me tell you. And I mean, listen, you can do all those things and still not succeed. We tried launching again on Product Hunt this past year, and we didn't give it quite as much love and attention, but we, thought we knew what to do. And we had obviously been number 1 before. And the second time around, we just didn't do as well, right? Maybe the day of the week or whatever it might have been, or maybe we, had gotten a lot of the support that we had already kind of asked for a lot of favors. And sometimes like Product Hunt will just like screw you over. Sometimes they'll just like, they won't show you on the homepage. Sometimes they'll like take votes away from you because other teams that are fighting to win number 1 will just like report you. It's a bit brutal out there.
The rough world of Product Hunt. I had no idea they would report you like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a good website called Product Wars, and you can go on there and it will show you like a line chart of like vote counts throughout the day. And so if you're launching on Product Hunt, you definitely need to be on Product Wars and like checking like your upvotes and comments per hour.
Interesting. Yeah. Has it been a big like driver for you guys either on launch day or since then, just driving customers?
I think it was helpful for us. There's always a boost around it. It's always a way just to, honestly, it's a good excuse to kind of like tell your whole network that you exist. So we always see a bunch of traffic come in around our Product Hunt launches. And then we still get, months later, people find us on Product Hunt. I don't know exactly how we get suggested, or maybe we're somewhere in there, SEO or something. So it's helpful. But when you think about growth, right, as a startup, right, you think about your growth engine as a metaphor, right? And you think about, what makes a car go in the engine, right? You put gas in, right? You have like the efficiency of the motor, and you have like turbos, right? And then you have like boosts, right? So Product Hunt is like, you add a little bit of gas and it's like a little bit of a boost, but it's not like a long-term efficient thing, right? It's like one day you just like throw a bunch of people in and that's kind of it. It's not really turbocharging growth. It's not a long-term sustainable thing for growth. It's just one of those things that it's like getting an article in press, right? It's it gets you a little bit more awareness, right? And all those things build up over time. So it's like one of the things that you should do, but it certainly isn't the only thing. I think people sometimes obsess about the product hunt release and maybe give it a bit more attention or value than necessarily it brings.
I would 100% agree with that. I think especially these days, I think people are having more success just, having long-term growth strategies that are sustainable. You can't launch on product hunt every day.
It's honestly just about having a great product and a great experience and solving a real need for your users and making sure that you serve them well. I think one of my biggest lessons in just being an entrepreneur is focus on retention, focus on exceeding expectations of your clients, because in this day and age, what gets people to your product is word of mouth, right? And if you can go out there and you can hustle for your first 10, 20, 30 customers, absolutely, you should be able to do that, even if it's cold sales emails or LinkedIn outreach. But if those people actually have a great experience with you, they'll tell their friends and their colleagues and their acquaintances about you. And that's ultimately those are the most valuable leads you want. You can do the product hunt release, you can do SEO, you can, we get customers now that come through us through ChatGPT, but the ones that actually convert into high ACV, high retention customers generally are relationship driven. Either they're getting referred to us or we're meeting them out in the world, and it isn't about like getting thousands of new signups. So product hunt, I think, you might get a bunch of people kind of kicking the tires, but they might just be there to kick the tires and kind of see what the thing does.
Okay, you just mentioned you guys get customers through ChatGPT. I think a lot of people would want to know how you do that and how you sort of optimized, I guess, your SEO to be picked up by these AI bots. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Obviously, the content that we're getting ranked on in ChatGPT was like before anything came out, right? And the model development times are long, right? So like, I think ChatGPT is still only up to like last October or something in terms of what the LLM is actually trained on. It can now do like web searches and things like that, which maybe that's the component that needs to be further studied. But from our understanding, we're actually like part of the LLM, like LLM like knows about us. And I think part about that is like and this is a blessing and a curse for us, right? Like for us, we started off being a college-focused freelance platform, which is very distinct. It's very distinct from Upwork or Fiverr or these other platforms. So because we had that differentiation early on and we produced content, we raised money on that, the LLM learned about us. So when you do like specific queries for like, I want to hire like college students in America to help with marketing, like will come up. Apparently, it's not necessarily, incredibly deterministic, and there's no data. We don't get any data out of these LLMs about like how we're ranking or how we're showing up, which would be a really interesting tool or feedback to get from OpenAI. But I think that there's definitely a world where this stuff really matters. And, we've actually invested a lot in SEO recently over the last, couple of months. And that might seem counterintuitive because everyone's like, well, SEO is dying. Google search is dying, right? So like, don't invest anything in SEO. And I think people are actually very wrong. I think, these LLMs are going to continue to learn. They're going to be based off of web content, how things rank. And, I think that if you create great content, unique content, human generated content that's like related to specific queries, that has knowledge that might not already be in these LLMs, you'll get picked up. You'll get picked up in maybe it's not today, but when like GPT-5 or GPT-4.1 comes out, whatever the next iteration is, you hope that you can kind of be included in that. So search is never going to die. The search experience might change, but honestly, people are searching more than ever because of like how great Gemini and ChatGPT are. I find myself asking questions of these things probably more than I used to Google for things. And when you think about like query volume, this would be a really interesting metric to track. My hypothesis is query volume is growing significantly, and people are searching now more than ever. So I think it's definitely a growing field in terms of, hey, can I actually produce content for SEO that's like optimized to be picked up for LLMs? I mean, and I definitely think that is going to become a core component to like producing content, but people still search, and they're searching now more than ever. And if you play it right, you start getting fed into these like LLMs. And if you can make it in and be top of the query, that's not getting re-ranked every like couple months, and it's potentially a huge growth unlock for you.
Yeah, it's almost like the function of SEO and the content for SEO is changing because people are interacting with that data in a new way through a chatbot interface rather than through the list of links that show up on Google. But I totally agree with you. The query volume is probably skyrocketing and should continue to skyrocket as the proliferation of AI grows. So yeah, couldn't agree more. What are you say you've invested a lot in this over the past few months. What have you guys learned that other founders can take away? Like what should people be doing for SEO that they might not be?
I think there's a couple of things, right? I mean, for us, we had a pretty bloated website, and site performance is a huge component. So like you got to make sure you have all the technical stuff down, right? And then it's spelunking, right? It's very rare that you produce a page that's all of a sudden starts netting results. Now people know that. Now the interesting thing is that we've actually produced a lot of content in the last month or two, and it started getting ranked within a week. And we had a couple articles that started driving like thousands of page site visits to our site, and we could have never have predicted. Like we would have never have thought that page was going to drive traffic, but it is. It's still driving traffic today. So I think, yes, it is true. Like generally, you're not going to see results overnight or like in the short term, but SEO is really about the long game and looking at it, seeing what's ranking, and then, doubling down on what's working. So something that we're trying to do a lot of is we have a couple of unique SEO, call them projects, right? Like different content, different approaches to page structures and content type. Some of it is related to the field of marketing and design. Some of it is related to hiring and our platform specifically. And other pieces of it are about like interconnecting these things. And we have other ideas and things we want to do. But when we start to see results on one of these pages or one of these like content types, we're trying to double down and expand. So like one of the things we've done recently is doing pretty well is we create a list of keywords that were all related to like marketing and design tools, kind of like a glossary of like, here's all these tools, Riverside, which is what we're reporting on right now, right? Canva, Figma, right? Things that are just tools that marketers and designers use, and trying to create content around these tools and explaining what they are and interconnecting them with other tools, and then actually connecting those tools to like paint like our talent profiles that have those tools on them. So it creates this like interconnectedness between our pages, right? And different kind of structures. So it's easy to crawl and helps these algorithms and search, helps them understand kind of what your site is an expert in. And that's actually started to that's something new that we've been working on, and we're already seeing some good results. I don't know if it's the highest intent traffic, but we definitely are seeing a huge spike in just traffic in general. And we're believers that that's helpful, because assuming these people are marketers or hire designers, right? They see Pangea, they end up on our site, it might stick in their brain. And a month or two from now, when they're talking with a friend and need to hire someone, maybe, just maybe, they'll remember us, right? So there's obviously a whole world of marketing in terms of, retargeting and things like this. But yeah, I think SEO is incredibly powerful, and, it's one of those things that we're seeing some early results on, but I know that the greatest results of it will be in 12 months from now.
Building an audience is a full-time job, or at least it can feel like that when you're busy running your startup. But with AI making software easier to build, getting distribution is more important than ever. I can help. After growing my LinkedIn to over 40,000 followers and having 100,000 across all platforms, as well as a 60,000 subscriber newsletter, I know how impactful having an audience can be when you're building a startup these days. So I started Megaphone Studios, a ghostwriting agency specifically built for founders and their startups. Think of us like your startup's chief content officer. We turn your LinkedIn, X, or newsletter into a machine for lead generation, follower growth, and building your influence as a thought leader in your space. Our process is super lightweight for you, while still delivering content that only you uniquely could write. And our plans are flexible, with no long-term lock-in, because we know how fast things can change at startups. Oh, and I brought my buddy Blake Emal along to help me run the business. He has even more followers than I do. So email me at hauk@megaphone.network and mention the pod for a first month discount.
So how are you thinking about investing in growth channels, SEO, others, in sort of the world where pivots are totally possible, and in some cases like can happen on a dime and be super frequent? Like, you guys have pivoted a couple of times over the course of the company. Most recently, you've niched down into these marketers and designers. How do you think about investing in growth channels with that kind of backdrop?
Yeah, I used to be very like, oh, we're going to be on every channel and try everything and like run a bunch of experiments across channels and like figure out what's the best. And it sounds great in theory. I think we were a little bit too early in pre-product market fit to see those kind of things pan out. Our current philosophy is one channel, one customer, one product. I think a lot of founders have too many products, too many customer types, too many channels. And if you're less than $1 million in ARR, it's like you're trying to do too much, right? And I've been trying to challenge ourselves, like, can we like just place marketing talent with Series B companies and meet these founders at events in New York? And or something, whatever that channel might be. Can it just be email outbound? Can it just be podcast content? Can it just be LinkedIn outreach? Right? Can it just be X, Y, and Z? And obviously, it is always generally a little bit of all of the above. And if you can't get to $1 million in ARR with a single customer and a single kind of offering, you probably don't have a big enough business to be pursuing in this space. Anyway, it could be a good business, but we always convince ourselves like we have to do every role, every function, every level of seniority, right? Every scope of engagement, right? Every price point for every type of customer, who can find us from every possible channel. And it's just too many things when you're a team of like 3 people to manage. So yeah, we do get a lot of great word of mouth. We get SEO traffic leads now. I meet a lot of people just, by going out to things here in the city. And, we've really tried to focus in on like what type of things that we do. I still struggle with this. I still like to say yes to folks, but we're really, for instance, trying to get away from I need to hire someone today for a project this week and I have a budget of $1,000. It's just not, and they're an engineer, right? That's just like outside the scope of we have talent that are high quality that are looking for 10, 20, 30-hour week engagements, and they are going to last for 6 months, right? Like, and also, like, if you're thinking about the ACV of those two contracts, we're talking about $1,000 ACV where, we're netting a couple $100 versus a contract that's, $50,000 to $60,000. And now we're netting tens of thousands of dollars. So it's like, and they take the same amount of effort. So do you want to be working on like, are you going to get to $1 million in ARR by closing an incremental couple $100 in net revenue at a time? Or are you going to get to $1 million in ARR by focusing on contracts where you're netting $10,000, right? And all of a sudden it's like, wow, maybe it seems actually a lot easier to get to $1 million a year on these like $10,000 contracts than the $1,000 contracts. So part of that's just making a choice. I think as a founder, you don't quite know who you serve yet or what the value is. But I think that it's important to make that decision. And every single time that we've just made a decision about what we do or don't do, it's really helped us reach the next phase.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes a ton of sense. Talk to me about those phases. Like as you've made those decisions to sort of niche down, change the focus, even change the product early on, this indicates to me that you probably know what works and what doesn't work well when you're pivoting, when you're changing course. So, how can you do that without sort of putting off your users?
You might very well put off your users. That is one thing I just want to bring up first before I say, here's how to do it without putting off your users is sometimes you make these decisions and part of that is a decision to like no longer serve part of the people that you had previously served. And I'll say it's totally okay. It's your company. You get to choose who you serve, right? This isn't, unless you're running a nonprofit and you have some big endowment and people gave you money, right? With the social, like this is not that. I'm not talking about edge. This is like you're a founder of a tech startup, right? If you want to change the product, you can change the product. Yeah, you might piss off some folks. That's life, right? Like you need to focus on who you want to serve. I have fired companies. I have fired clients. I have fired people that we've worked with basically because I'm like, you're just not really a fit for what we're trying to do anymore. You came here looking to hire, the first one was we started off initially and we were like a college student focused platform, right? So it was all about hiring college students. And we had like unpaid opportunities. Like there used to be the option for people to post a paid job or like an unpaid internship. Okay. And at one point we made the decision to like get rid of the unpaid internships. And I'll tell you, that pissed off a lot of people. That pissed off companies and it also pissed off talent because some of the talent were like, I'm willing to work for free. I'll do anything. And I understand it. But I was like, that's not how we're going to turn this into a big business. We don't believe in unpaid internships. Yes, there is a value to it. It's a different podcast, subject. But that ultimately is like, we're not going to be a successful company doing unpaid internships. And we didn't feel good charging the companies some amount of fee and then giving the talent nothing, which there are other companies in the space that do. So we made that decision. And yeah, we lost some companies, but guess what? We weren't making any money off of them. So, and in that process, we ended up attracting more high quality talent and focusing more on companies that had similar values to us. So that's an example of, honestly, like, yeah, we put off some people, but in making that choice, we actually attracted a lot more folks that were aligned with our values. And still to this day, we have the same thing. Like everything's paid. Our hourly, we're starting to have these like minimum hourly rates on our platform. $50 an hour and up. It's all about quality. And yeah, there are companies that come saying, no, I don't want to pay $50 an hour. My budget is $18 an hour or like $5 an hour. Like that's what I want to pay. I'm like, that's not what we want to do. Right. Because honestly, when we put those jobs out on our platform, then the talent that are the $75 or $100 or $150 an hour talent, they see the $15 an hour job and they're like, this is not the platform that I want to spend time on. So they delete their account or they never come back, right? And then a week later, when I have a job that's willing to spend $100, a client that's willing to spend $100, the talent's gone. So you need to make these decisions, and it's okay. You can't serve everyone. It's a typical, first-time founder challenge, right? Or dilemma of like, you don't want to say no to people, you want to say yes to everyone, and believe you can kind of serve everyone, but you can't, and you shouldn't. Now, over time, you can grow and expand, but it's really important to have like that one customer. Or at least like one type of engagement that it's okay. I think trying to serve like a Series A and a Series B and maybe you can kind of, have a number of different type of clients, but they should generally be using your product in the same way. So yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely been times where we've like put off folks, but then interestingly, like when we pivoted from being a college student platform to being a more of a professional platform, yeah, we did lose some companies that were only here to hire like college students. But ultimately, over the last 2 years, a lot of them have come back because actually I liked working with you guys, and I now need someone who isn't a college student. I need someone who has 5 years of experience, and I want to work with you. And they've become really amazing clients of ours down the road. So it's okay saying no to folks. It's important to, especially when it's about business, right? So, we have a number of old clients who like literally we're making no money off of, and it's like, yeah, you want to keep helping them. But, we've made a lot of changes to our business model, our process. It's much more, people are happier with it now and we're making more money now. So, and that'll be good in the long run because we can stay alive. We're going to get to break even, before we run out of money. And that's ultimately what it's about. Like if refusing to change or refusing to focus is the thing that's going to cause the company to die, like, don't be noble. Like you're not, and that's like, no one cares at the end of the day. If your company dies because you refuse to shift who you were focused on, then like, what good does that do anybody?
Yeah, it's a net negative for society masquerading as some noble pursuit. So if a founder's in that scenario, how can they recognize that? How do they know that they're too broad? How do they know that it's time to pivot or niche down or anything like that?
Here's the thought exercise that I like to do. Let's say that you sold your company tomorrow to a new owner. Okay. And you're that new owner. So let's say you sold the company to yourself and you're stepping into your business without and it's day 0 again, and you don't have any of the founder baggage, and you can look at it with clear eyes and say, and be like, okay, you're smart. Here's like, you're listening to this, you're running a company, you're smart. You know the space that you're in. I reckon you're incredibly capable, and you actually know what you need to do. So the thought exercise that I like to do is say, all right, I sold a company to myself. I'm the new CEO of the company. And if I were looking at this honestly, as if I was like in college again, like doing a case study in like entrepreneurship or business class. I mean, I was a history major, but I did some entrepreneurship classes. You do a case study. Like, what are the things that you would tell this company to do to get back on a path towards growth and profit? What would you advise? What would you encourage them to do? Right. And I have found that to actually be an incredibly helpful thing to do. It forces me to be really honest with myself, have a bit of separation, and then, actually lay out what I think is right for the business. And the reason why we don't do these things is they're oftentimes hard. Like hard decisions are hard, like, and they cause pain. But you talk to any founder that increased their margin, you talk to any founder that leaned up their team, you talk to any founder that like pivoted, right, and decided to focus on a new thing, you'll be hard pressed to find anyone who regretted making that decision, right? We oftentimes put these things off for way too long, and it causes more pain in the long run. So I think it's important to make hard decisions as quickly as you can, as soon as you have clarity on them, and keep moving forward. And if you come into your company as if like you're the new owner of it, you can oftentimes see that decision more clearly. And then if you really ask yourself, like, well, why haven't you done it already? You can start to feel yourself making excuses that maybe aren't based in good business.
That's a great thought exercise. I would recommend any founder do that. That sounds, I never thought of that before, but it's really smart. Is it applicable the other way? So is it applicable to a scenario where, maybe you're too niche down? Maybe you're focusing on something that is never going to become a big market, has no chance of becoming a big business. Can you apply it that way too?
Yeah, I think you need to. I think that we, as founders, we do this thing where hopefully you go all in and you put the blinders on, right? Like you're a racehorse and you're just dead focused. And it's super important to do that. And for an extended period of time, right? I don't know what, maybe it's, an accelerator program of 3 months at the very least, and hopefully it's 3 years. But I think it's important to sometimes step back out of what you've been building and think about what has changed in the world. What are you excited about? What's happening, right? And you might pivot your business as a result of this. But I think a lot of founders don't spend, after they're a couple of years in their business, don't spend nearly enough time revisiting their thinking about what's changing in the world and what does that mean, and if they're building in the right space. Sometimes the companies that people build are great opportunities to learn and expand a muscle. And it's so rare that the first company that you do is the thing that, creates generational wealth. If we use that as just like a goal, right? Because I think that people would hope that like success with a startup, at some level is financial at some point in your life, right? But so rarely is that your first one, right? And there might very well be a tendency of people working on their first startups for too long. I don't know. I mean, I can have mine for like 7.5 years, so I don't know what that says about me. But at the same time, I think that things have been going really well recently. So I do think that it's important to step back, ask yourself what's changing in the world, and just, continue to talk to other founders that are building different companies and ask them what they think is changing in the world. At some point you'll build your second company and hopefully your third. And it's much more likely that second or third company is going to be the thing that, leads to a significant financial outcome than the first. But the first is really the way that you learn how to do everything to begin with, to put yourself in a position for the second or the third. I think there's probably, the word is escaping me, but there are too many founders that build a company that learn all the skills that it would take to become a successful founder that don't quite make it successfully and burn out and then leave the startup world and go back to corporate. And when they're now the ones that have the right skills, and honestly, if they were to put their minds onto something else, they could probably make it incredibly successful.
Yeah, I don't know what the word for that is either, but I think just keeping going, not even necessarily with the same idea, to your point. Maybe it makes sense to shut something down and move on to something new and start fresh, but keeping yourself motivated and having that intrinsic motivation we were talking about earlier, I think is really important, because not a lot of people know how to build great businesses. When you look at everybody in the world, there's just a small set of human beings, and using that knowledge can be valuable for yourself, for the people around you, for your community, and everything like that. Actually, on that note, I noticed a thread throughout this conversation and throughout your career more broadly around community, right? You joined Kairos, you used community as a go-to-market strategy for Pangea. You've started a New York City Founders Club that we haven't talked about more recently. And a couple of times in this conversation, you've referenced community as well. Why has that been such an emphasis for you so far, and how do you think it's helped you as a founder?
Well, people are everything. People are everything, right? I mean, you build for people. You build with people. And without community, I mean, at a broad sense, there's no purpose in anything, right? Like, and so I think it's just important to kind of like get yourself out there and be involved and think about who you're building for. And like humans are social creatures. Like this whole idea of like a business and like building products and like sharing it in a market is like predicated on there being other people to be in the market with you. It's to me like we are a community, we are a society, like we are a part of a community, whether or not you think you are or are not, and maybe how you define it is different. So, I mean, my philosophy on life is very much like there's no way to not be in community at some level. Like we are all a part of a community in some shape or form, even if it's just by being a human being. And you don't talk to anyone ever. So community is like really important to me. I think that I've been working on being just intentional about who I'm in community with. They say that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I really want to surround myself with people who I have similar values with, people who I'm inspired from, and people who bring out the best version of myself. So yeah, YC was great. Kairos was good. And now I'm working on this new community in New York called the New York City Founders Club. And it was born actually out of, a friendship that I developed with 2 of my fellow YC batchmates who are founders of other companies. And, building a company is a lonely journey. A lot of people don't understand it. Your family, they don't understand it. Your friends from college, they don't quite understand it. Your boyfriend, girlfriend, they might not understand it. They might not. They support you, I'm sure, right? But being a founder is lonely, and community helps us address that. It helps surround us with people who we can learn from and build relationships with. And maybe they become customers. Maybe they're inspiration for a new idea of a new direction you can go. And maybe there's people that you can spend some time with, right? So I'm big on community. I'm big on just relationships and big on being intentional about who you spend your time with.
You guys have also used community really well as a go-to-market, because you guys have, I mean, correct me if the number is wrong, maybe it's grown a bit since then, but I think like 75,000 creative workers in your community, freelancers, fractional people, to power Pangea, right? How did that happen? That's a huge number. 75,000 is huge. How did you make that happen? And sort of what does that mean? Can you scale that indefinitely to grow the business to true venture scale? Like what's the vision there?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken us time to get there. Obviously, I think word of mouth is important. Again, for everyone who finds value and hears about us, there's the opportunity that can share it with more folks. I know that community number size sounds great, but you compare it to like Indeed or LinkedIn, it's like a drop in the bucket. So the thing that for me is I don't really care about venture scale anymore. Like I don't really care about pleasing the investors. I care about pleasing our users and our customers. And if that leads to a lot of growth and more money, then great. But for us, it's about quality, right? You can double that. You can go from 75,000 to 150,000. But it's like, well, who is that incremental 75,000, right? And I really care about who they are, right? And what they're capable of than just you have an account on Pangea, right? Clients come to us because of the quality of the people they can find in our network and our community. It's the capability, it's the reliability, it's the communication ability, it's the hunger, it's their ambition, it's their creativity, right? It's the fact that to find these people on LinkedIn or Upwork or Indeed, it just takes so much time, right? So our value add is actually being able to sift through that and surfacing up the top 1%. So of that 75,000, who are the top 750, right? And you can think about it this way: if we had 750 of the top people on our platform, and their hourly rate was $100 an hour, and they were all doing 15 hours a week for us, and that's 4 weeks a month, that would be almost $500,000 of transaction volume, a month. My quick math. So and that's a great business. That's a really good business, and you don't need to have 1 million people on the platform. That's less than 1,000, talent profiles. So I care most about quality. And that's the problem to be solved at the moment. That's where we're putting a lot of effort in terms of, and we're using a bunch of AI as well in terms of, of all the folks in our network, who's the best fit for what, and making sure that they connect as quickly as possible. So yeah, I'm proud of 55 or 75K plus, but I'm trying to break my addiction of vanity metrics and focus on the metrics that matter, right? I used to be super pumped about how many colleges. It was 1,800. We had 1,800. We had over 1,800 schools represented on Pangea, and it was like on the website and something I can mention in conversation, and it would impress people. But I don't care about impressing people. I care about building a successful business. I want people who use Pangea to find real value with it. And for us, it's more around, I'd rather have 1,000 more incredible type like A caliber, top caliber talent on our platform who are hundreds of dollars an hour than I do just doubling the revenue numbers, because some VC somewhere is going to see that and want to invest as a result.
I would imagine that that's pretty valuable to other founders, sort of that what makes someone hit that quality bar. Because a lot of founders, in a lot of cases, they're first time hiring people, right? They go from being managers or even just ICs at companies or college students themselves to being a founder. They hire a whole team. What do you know from seeing thousands of these, fractional hiring situations play out that they should keep in mind for hiring in general?
Have a criteria of what's important to you. When my co-founder and I, when we made our first hire, we sat down and we said, what are like the 4 things that we care about in a candidate? We were hiring a designer. Part of it was the aesthetic. Part of it was their, thought process. Some of that was like their output, their hustle. Like how are they going to be really reliable and communicate? I think there's one other one, maybe compatibility. And we just when we talked to candidates, we had a blind ranking process, and we would, I would give them a score. My co-founder would give them a score 1 through 5. And then we wouldn't talk about it. And then after the interview, we would reveal our impressions, and we would see where we aligned and see where we didn't align. And that was really helpful to us in our process. It helped us hone in more on what we thought was good and what wasn't good. And we ended up making a great hiring decision as a result. Before we hired, we had them do we brought them in on kind of a trial basis, right? And this is something that I talk to founders about all the time is you can interview, you can have multiple rounds of interviews, you can have multiple rounds of technical, whatever it might be. But until you work with somebody, right, you really don't know. And there's no hack, right? Our hack is we make it as easy as possible for you to bring someone in as an hourly consultant and work together on a project and see if it makes sense. And then if it does, you can bring them in full-time contract to hire. And that honestly, that's like YC's hat too. It's if you can hire them as a freelancer first for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, and actually assign them work and work with them, right? It reduces some of the risk for them. If they have a full-time job, they can kind of work with you part-time. Not everyone is willing to do this. A lot of our talent on Pangea are, which is another reason why we have a lot of companies who like using us, because we make that easy. So my hack is, have a process, have a rubric, understand what's important to you. You might have to compromise a bit, but it'll allow you to stack rank candidates. And then ultimately, it's okay to hire someone, bring them in hourly. And if it's not a good fit, move on. And it can take some time to find the right one. But, they say it's hire slow, fire fast. And I think that having a process, bringing someone on in hourly is slow. And if it's not a good fit, you can end it and you can move on. And I think that's really hard to do when you're trying to make I'm going to make a W-2 hire right now. Right off the bat, I've had 3 interviews with you and I'm going to offer you some huge salary and expect you to knock out of the park. It's really hard to get right on the first go. So, and now with AI and with how companies are being built, I'd argue that you can put off hiring for quite a while. You can get away with augmenting yourself with AI in a lot of ways, or bringing in someone fractionally to kind of help move things forward. There's generally a lot of stuff you can do before you get to hiring someone full time.
Yeah. And you even see, not that they're the biggest company in the world, but you do see bigger companies doing this. Linear is a great example. I think they exclusively do these work trials, and that's what they call these work trials now. I completely agree with you. More companies should adopt this as long as they can find good candidates who are willing to do so. I guess, what sort of made you so bullish on this trend to kind of go all in on it with Pangea?
I equate it to it's like cloud computing, right? If you go back to, the era before AWS, when you were deploying, a new product, you had to buy a server and have that thing plugged into your living room and that's just running all the time, right? And regardless of what was needed, and the machine, gets old and slow after a distant time, but you have this thing kind of running all the time. And one of the things that cloud computing, it was why it's been such a game changer is, and people don't really talk about it anymore, they take it for granted, but this is like a brand new thing, like in the last decade, is you can kind of scale it up, you can scale it down, you pay for what you use, right? You need a micro machine, you need a bigger machine, you can add RAN, you can add storage, you can spin it up, you can use Kubernetes to create these micro containers that scale up, scale down, vertical, horizontal, right? And you can align like what you're actually paying for with what you're actually using. And you can do the same thing with talent now. To with a high degree of similarity. So like you don't need to like you have a need. You don't need to like just hire a full-time person, right? You can hire someone for 20 hours a week if that's what you need. You can hire someone for 10 hours a week or 30 hours a week. You can hire them just hourly. So it could be 10 hours a week, 15, 20. It just goes up. It scales down as you need, right? And I think that to us is so obvious, right? Like your needs as a company are the same as like your needs for compute. Like things grow, things change, like things are different at different times of day, different places. So while it might not be, totally as commoditizable as like servers, right? Nor doesn't need to be or should it be. There's a lot of power in terms of bringing in like an expert or a specialist for 10, 20 hours a week to run a channel for you who's better at it than anyone on your team is, and have this kind of more mixed or blended team. So you have this core team of dedicated full-time W-2s, your founding team, and then you start to augment and bring in fractional folks, particularly at the seed stage and Series A. And then you might go through a stage of like hypergrowth, Series A, Series B, Series C, where, you have a really huge product roadmap and you have a lot of stuff you're trying to build on. And it might make sense to just go and hire 100 engineers and, 20 design, whatever it might be. There's a lot of challenges in that. But, there's a time and place for that. But now we're working a lot with like Series C, Series D companies, right? Who have that core team. They're 1,000-person company. They're not trying to hire another 1,000 people. They're looking to bring in other fractional or even full-time contractors, right? That, for a 12-month contract to work with them. So yeah, we think it's a really exciting trend, the move towards fractional. And fractional is also this, historically was like, you think about fractional as like a fractional executive, fractional CFO. And you had like good people who were like the fractional CFOs or like $1,000 an hour. And then you had like the freelancer, which is like a $15 an hour person. And there was like this big, and that was like, those are your options. You can get something cheap on Fiverr, or you can like, hire a fractional CFO. And what we're doing with, and what we're seeing with Pangea is the extension of what fractional means and is to move beyond an executive into being, it's a specialist. It's an independent contributor. It's an independent contributor. It's someone that's a manager of a channel on your team, right? And they're a different caliber of talent than you would otherwise find on a freelancing platform, but they're not, purely strategy, right? They're strategy and execution. And it's someone who can get stuff done for you and think about what they're doing if it's the most efficacious thing you're working on.
Yeah, that sort of middle ground makes a ton of sense. It's probably the most valuable of those kind of three options for a lot of founders. You just sort of put somebody in a channel or an area of the business, let them own it, and that's all you need to do. Then you talk to them and you got it covered. So I can't believe we haven't talked about fundraising yet, but you mentioned that, you're sort of over the VC process. If it happens, great. You're not really looking out for it. And I think you guys have raised a little over 3 million historically. Why sour on it? And why not go down that and try to make the venture scale business?
Yeah, it's not that I'm sour on it. It's just that like, if you can get to default alive and which is profitable, right? Without having to raise money, I think it honestly puts you you're in a better, you don't have to raise, you don't have to sell, you don't have to shut down, you can just run it, right? You have a lot more agency in terms of what the future of the business is. And ultimately, like you have to get there eventually. Like it might be easier to get there by scaling to, raising $100 million and going super big. Like, there's definitely a playbook there, right? Which is, capture market share. Now we are in an incredibly competitive market. We're in staffing and recruiting, and there are thousands of staffing recruiting firms and platforms, and a lot of the startups in our space have just raised way too much money. They've raised 30 million, 50 million, 100 million. That's a lot of money in your capital stack. A lot of money. Look at TopTal as a counter example. TopTal, unlike the other companies that raised 30, 40, 50 million plus, they raised 2 million, 2.5 million. That's all they ever raised. And they raised less than us.
They've never actually converted that note either, right?
There's some issues around that. But Tasso, he literally, that's it. And no one really knows what the numbers are today, but it's over $100 million a year business. I think everyone would agree it's over. Whether it's 100 million or 600 million, right? There's up for debate. You can ask him yourself. But it's a successful business, right? It has healthy margins. It's tech enabled, and he's built a really successful tech enabled staffing company that just prints money. And he doesn't have any money that he has to give back necessarily. So, Sam Altman talks about how we're in the era of perhaps having the first company valued at over $1 billion and has a single employee. We're not there yet, but conceivably, it's there's no reason why it's impossible. I don't think there's any physical limit. So I'm really hyped up on, we're in this era where the way in which you run a business has fundamentally changed in the last 2 years. The type of tooling that you have available to use has fundamentally changed, right? I've been able to take our team from 12 people to 3 people, and we've grown revenue. We ship product faster, and we've made a lot, and things are in a much better place than they were, 2 years ago, and our burn is a fraction of what it was, right? So I'm a huge believer that you can build a hyper efficient, scalable business without raising tens of millions of dollars. And I want to prove that to myself. I want to prove that to the world. And then if we figure out this thing if capital becomes the impediment to growth, we'll raise more money. In our current state, capital isn't the impediment to growth. One might argue that time is our biggest enemy, and raising some more money would give us a bit more time. But you know what? Just like being in NYC, I think it's good to have a clock running. I think it puts fire under your butt to make it work before time runs out.
If you don't have that urgency, you have to force it on yourself every day, and having that external clock can help. You mentioned, not on this call, but you mentioned before that when you guys finished your first accelerator, I want to go back to that for a second. When you finished your first accelerator, you thought that funding would come in quickly. So if we're going down the traditional founder path, you're like, yes, we've done the accelerator. Now let's get funded and go conquer the world. But that didn't happen, right? And, we talked a little bit earlier about founder resilience. I think that's probably one of the best examples of a founder sort of being resilient that you can have. You're expecting a big fundamental step change in the history of the company. Doesn't happen. How do you adapt? What do you learn?
Ego death is real. Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like not needing permission and kind of being in a chicken and an egg. And I think for a while there, we were like, well, we just got to keep trying to convince people, right? And keep trying to convince and keep working on it. But ultimately, there was nothing stopping us from launching. There was nothing stopping us because, my co-founder is technical, right? There's nothing stopping us from literally, I would just walk out to the RISD library and set up a table and just hand out little rubber duckies on Amazon that were 10 cents a piece, and hand them out. You sign up, you downloaded my app, here's a rubber ducky. And it was incredibly effective. And John would be there with his computer, and people have a bug, we'd fix it. No, you don't need any permission. I think we got in trouble from a couple schools a couple times, but you know what I mean? Whatever, until you get kicked out. You just show up and you can ask for forgiveness later. So I think we had that in us of just we had a product, and we were, a couple blocks away from our users, and we just would go and try to get users and get feedback and try to get them to use it. I don't know what is wrong with us in that we didn't give up. I think most people would have just been so cringe or whatever, so embarrassed that you would have given up, because it's definitely to most of my friends post college went, moved to New York City, got a job, were working in finance, whatever it might be. And I was still in Providence. I didn't leave. I had a table on a college campus, trying to get people to download an app that was very different than what it is today. And not getting that, you know what I mean? And literally doing anything to get a couple users and not getting revenue. Okay? And it was hard. There were some really tough days. And there was, I used to do a thing. I had a car up in Rhode Island, and whenever I was, needed some space, I'd just go hop in my car. I'd hop on 195 going out east towards the Cape. It's a nice highway. It's not overly traffic. No one's out there. And I would just, I would open up Otter, which has a voice. It has you might know Otter if it's joined a meeting room, but they've been around for a while. It started off as an app, and you could transcribe. So I would create voice memos, and I would talk about what was going on and just talk to myself a bit. And I still have these recordings to this day. And I can't tell you how many recordings that I made in 2017, 2018, 2019. Of just being, oh, it's too late. Like we're out of time. No one needs it. Like, blah, blah, and almost like borderline defeat, and, a couple months would go by and we finally would hit we got into Nash Challenge, right? And then again, and then 6 months later, we raised our first month, and it's a journey. It's like ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. And even on those early days, right, of like talking to students, and like some of them would have a bad time. Some of them had a great experience. A lot of people loved what we were doing. And it was honestly, that is what carried me through. Like the one conversation in 3 or 4 where people were really excited by what we were doing and really encouraging probably is the thing that gave us the encouragement to stick with it as long as we did.
Yeah, every founder needs a release. And these days, you should just open up the ChatGPT app and just talk into it and let it tell you what you're missing. Cool. Okay, one more quick one, and then we have a couple rapid fire outro questions. I want to plug this. You did a TED Talk on stoicism, and I think it's a great talk. I think more people should check it out. Give me the hyper condensed TLDR. Why should founders explore stoicism?
There are things that are inside your control, and there are things that are not. There are things that are in your control. And I think that we oftentimes confuse or don't quite respect or understand what's in our control and what's out of our control. And we tend to focus on or get upset by things that happen in our life that we actually have no control over. Doing so is a waste of energy and waste of time. Now, we're humans, right? So I'll give you some forgiveness. I get upset by things that are out of my control. This person honking in the street that's annoying me. You know what I mean? But if I can't change anything about it, it's not worth letting your mind get upset about it. Like, you're causing that harm to yourself. You have a lot of agency over these things. And in a startup, in life, but in a startup, there's so much that's outside of your control. If an investor says yes or no, if a customer says yes or no, whatever it might be, right? You can't let that get the best of you. You have to focus on what you can control, and that's how you respond, right? It's what you choose to do next. It's what you choose to do about it. And as a founder, that's incredibly important. And that's what you need to come back to, because some days are amazing and some days are tough. But oftentimes what makes them amazing or tough are things that are outside your control. So if you just focus on what you can do next or what incremental thing you can do each day just to push the ball forward a little bit, you'll find yourself with a lot more peace of mind. And I guarantee a lot more progress to be shown.
So simple, so good. People should definitely go check it out in the full talk. Cool. Okay, we have a couple rapid fire outro questions we'd like to ask everybody. Number 1, name an investor who other founders should take capital from and why.
Lister Delgado. He's the managing director of Idea Fund. They're a small fund out of North Carolina, and was an early check for us. I mean, I love all my investors. I should name all of them. Underdog Labs, PJC. They're wonderful. Daniel Rosenthal. We have a lot of amazing investors. Carson Commission. Everybody. I mean, everyone we're taking money from has been so wonderful, and you should take money from them. But Lister has been great. He was the first $1 million check-in, and he, they took a board seat, which is, early, oftentimes a board seat at a seed round is, atypical, but it's honestly been one of the best decisions, right? He's been incredibly helpful. We had, for a while, we're doing bi-weekly check-ins and quarterly board meetings, and has always been super helpful, super supportive, never gotten in our way, has made connections for us, and has been a really helpful person to bounce ideas around. I think people don't put enough value on bringing in someone on the board at an earlier stage. I think it can be incredibly helpful. So I recommend taking money from Idea Fund.
What's one thing that you would change about the startup world?
I think more people should respond to cold emails.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What are they missing out on?
Everything. I think there's a lot of great products. I think there's a lot of great entrepreneurs who have great things and they don't know how to get to market, and they send you cold emails, and it's too easy to say F off. I think probably back in the olden days, it was easier to kind of get meetings with folks. I think there's a lot of spam in my email inbox too. So it's kind of hard to suss out who's legit and who's not. But I think that if it was easier to spot real startups doing real things in my inbox, I would be much more inclined to take a 10-minute call and about it.
What is your number one piece of advice for a first-time founder?
Do it. Just do it. Just do it. There's no Perfect is the enemy of good enough.
Okay, and last one. What is something that you believe that most people disagree with you about?
I think you have a lot more agency and control over your attitude and your general feeling than people like let on. Like, if you're not happy about something in your life, you can change it.
Cool. I love that. Speaks to some of the things we were talking about earlier too. Cool. Well, Adam, thanks so much for spending the time with me. If people want to follow you, check you out, check out Pangea, where should they go?
I'm most active on LinkedIn, so just follow me on LinkedIn, Adam Alpert, and I post about New York, I post about Pangea and just founder stuff all the time. So yeah, LinkedIn's the best.
Cool. And if people want to hire fractional folks, they should go to Pangea.app.
Pangea, Pangea.app, and click that little button that says start hiring.
Cool, man. Thanks for coming on. Good to have you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening. I write up my main takeaways from every conversation and make them available to all of our members at foundingjourney.com, along with a bunch of other perks and more content. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to Founding Journey on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. I post a new episode every Thursday. Also, consider leaving us a rating or a review. As a brand new podcast, this is the best way for us to get out there and founders to find us. See you next time.